All right, let's talk about grids now. Grids in relation to graphic design. So grids are our main tool for aligning things, okay? And whenever we have like a little more complex composition, like a poster, flyer, brochure, anything then like a one-off little design, like a logo or something like that, we've got a lot of elements together. We've got to create a grid, okay? Got to create a grid so we can put things together. So here are some examples of some grids. We've got the rules of thirds grid. We've got the golden ratio grid, a column, just a basic column, and then a baseline grid. So a rule of thirds is just breaking things up into 3 columns and 3 rows, okay? Golden ratio is based off an old kind of, I believe like ancient Greek. This idea they had that this like kind of conch like based kind of design was like the perfect ratio. We got just basic columns, which is a very normal kind of way to approach making anything like this. And then a baseline grid, kind of like a typed piece of paper or your line paper, where you've got everything in a line. Now you can use a baseline with columns, and that's going to work as well. Okay, here's just some visual examples. Okay, and these are supposed to be, this is a picture of 9 different compositions using the same rule of thirds grid. Okay, so we got 3 columns, 3 rows. And what this is trying to show you is that you can clump things together in different ways. Now, you don't have to just, make a, 9 individual little things there to fill up your grid. You can put a whole thing together, right? This could be a picture. This could be some text down here. On this composition, you get a lot of negative space. Usually leaving negative space is a good idea to make if you want to have a more elegant look to your composition, right? Filling it with everything, you can do that and that's fine, but it will not look as elegant. When you have space, it's going to make it look like this. This is so important that I can afford to leave space here, right? It helps you focus on what's there. So anyways, some examples of how you can clump things together, right? And again, these could be anything. It could be text, could be a picture, this could be text, this could be a heading, these could be columns of text, this could be a photo, right? And these could be columns of text, whatever it is. Okay, so now we're going to look at parts of a grid. So the first thing that we should be aware of is the margin, okay? The margin is a space that separates like all the content you have from the edge of the page, okay? So this is the most important thing I could tell you to add. So the margin is our first step in creating order, in giving us space to align things to the left, to the right, knowing where to put things on the top, the bottom. And it just creates that edge that is kind of vital for making this thing look professional and organized. Now, you can go out of the margin with things, but generally for text, you want to keep it away from the margin, okay? You want to keep that border. So you don't really want to go in there unless you're going to go over the margin. So if you're, over the page, if you're going to go outside of the page and have things like going off the image, which is a great idea and which I love to do in my compositions. But generally, if I have text that I want to make readable, I'm going to have to put it within that margin. You don't want to just go in that margin. You either want to be within the margin or go way out of it intentionally. But if you do that with text, it's not going to be as readable, okay? Which might be what you want too, depending on what kind of composition you're going to make. But for the general kind of norm, we want to have a margin and we want to kind of use it to organize all the text within those margins. All right, next we've got flow lines, okay? So flow lines are going to break the space into horizontal bands. So that's going to be like how we see things flowing from one to another, one space to another. It's going to be those lines that go across and look lined up, make things look like they're aligned together. Next, we've got columns, right? These are just vertical divisions of space like that, right? This is just a 3-column grid here. We've got rows, which breaks it up the other way, right? going horizontally. And we've got gutters. So gutters are the space that is between the grid, okay? All the little space there is that. Now again, sometimes when we group things together, we go in those gutters, but if we're looking at the grid, those are the gutters. Okay, we got a module. Module is one of these individual little spaces. Okay, those are all just called modules. A spatial zone is a group of modules that crosses, and becomes like one big kind of chunk, okay? So we're putting modules together from different rows and different columns and making chunks of information. Right, another example, this can go all sorts of ways, right? You can do this in many, many ways and group as many kind of as you want together. Okay, here's an example of just a kind of a empty page with just a grid set up on it. Right, now all these lines would not be seen, but these would be created in Illustrator, right? So you're gonna create these with guides. You could use paths, whatever you need to do. I usually use just my guides, but I can see here how it would be really helpful to have some different colors going on, because man, those guides can get complicated. All right, so here's just a poster here, and you can just see some alignment going from this page to that page, right? You can see the alignment right here, and to me, so this looks like a 1, 2, 3, 4 column grid, even though we can't really see all the columns, right? Because they're grouped together in modules, they're still there. And then here it looks like we've got, at least these 3 big sections going across, okay? But I mean, honestly, he's probably broke it up into smaller sections as well. Okay, this one's a little easier to see here. This is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, right? And you can see here this module is all grouped together here. And you can see this whole row here, here and below the title. We've put these modules together to make these larger kind of areas here, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Okay, here's another one, just broken down the center, and then you've just aligned things to that gutter in the center, and creates an interesting look. Probably a little more interesting than if you just did it all on the left side. And here's one where they've tilted it. They've tilted their grid, right? So you got this kind of gutter running down here. They got some text going here, and these however many, it's hard to tell because it's turned, but this is like 1 column. So I'm gonna imagine 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 columns. But you can see all these are just kind of joined together to make this really big module, right? Okay, and here's on a simple like little product here, right, where we've got 1, 2, 3 columns, but you can see how they've grouped these together, and you've got all this negative space here, right, and then the text down there. Okay, just to recap here, as we finish up, we're talking about grids. Margins. First thing you got to start with is deciding your margin. Now that is the most vital part. You got to bring a line over, make it even across, right? Now you can have different widths on the top and bottom from the sides, right? I would usually tend to keep my default is to keep it all even all the way across, okay, all around. But you could make the sides one width and then the top and bottom a different width. That might work, okay? And then however many columns you're going to set up, you've just got to decide, how you're going to do this. But the very most basic thing, the essential thing you have to do is at least set a margin. If you have a margin set, you've at least got alignment that you can create on the left side and on the right side. So you've got that. You can know where your top and your bottom is. And that's the very least you can do, okay, is that. Besides that, you could put a line down the center as well. This one doesn't because of the way they broke it up. It looks like the center line would be right here. But you could, very least you could do a margin and then a center line. And then, maybe you create a gutter in the center. Then you've got another thing. You could bounce text back and forth, and at least you got 2 columns. And that's very easy, most fundamental kind of way if you're going to set up any kind of poster or anything, I would at least give yourself a margin and then one step further than that would just be to create a center line, okay? And that is the basics of just kind of applying a grid so you can set up your alignment, right? This is a tool to create alignment in our compositions in graphic design.